It's the 4th of December and it's time for the 4th entry in my 24 Ghost Stories for Christmas. Now, one of my favourite series of all time is the BBC series from the 1970s called A Ghost Story for Christmas. Every Christmas from 1971 to 1978, the BBC would release an adaptation of a famous ghost story. These are amongst some of the best examples of the genre in television. In 1976, a Charles Dickens short story called The Signalman was adapted for this series. It stars Denham Elliott, and it was influenced by the experiences Charles Dickens had of a train crash firsthand. He was actually a survivor of a rather horrific train crash, and he suffered panic attacks and anxiety about this for the rest of his life. In the story, the main character, or the narrator, is a passerby who happens to have a chance encounter with a signalman. Now, a signalman is someone who would spend their working hours in a small working hut or shed next to a train line, and they would change the points to allow trains to go onto different tracks, and they would also put up signals for trains to stop to allow other trains to pass by. This would be accomplished by different signalmen across tens of miles of railway track communicating with one another through a simple bell system. So one signalman would press a button, a bell would go off in another signalman's hut, and it would allow them to know that a train was coming, and they would then change the points in the track. So that's the setup for the story. Anyway, the narrator meets this signalman and ends up forming a friendship with him. He spends many a night sitting accompanying him while he is doing his shift. Eventually, after talking, he realises that the signalman is going through a rather traumatic time because he believes that he is being haunted, almost set upon by a ghostly apparition that he's been seeing next to a tunnel just down the line. He's also being haunted by the sound of the bell ringing when there are no trains coming, and generally he feels like he's being given some sort of warning of what he does not know. And this is what the story is about, him trying to find out. What's great about it, as with many other great ghost stories, is that the entire story is, in a sense, the rational versus the superstitious. The narrator is the rational and the signalman is superstitious. He believes what he's experiencing is supernatural, and he just wants to know the meaning behind it. It's very atmospheric. The scenes with the signalman and the narrator in the signalman's hut are really fantastic, really atmospheric, very, very creepy, very eerie. And this entire TV series, Ghost Story for Christmas, was set up to not shock but create a chill in the audience, and it was also set up to pay homage to the ghost story genre in literary form. So it tries to keep the conventions of the ghost story, of the short ghost story, and it does that brilliantly. It's actually, the short story is fantastic, it really is, but this is a phenomenal adaptation of it. It really stays true to the spirit of the story. It's one of my favourite entries in the BBC's Ghost Story for Christmas. What was fantastic is that in recent years they've kind of begun that tradition again. The BBC have been doing ghost stories around about the Christmas period. You'll find out a lot more about this TV show as we progress, because I'm not giving away too much when I say that I'm going to be talking about several of my favourite entries within this series, because I hold up the BBC's Ghost Story for Christmas as possibly the greatest interpretation of the ghost story mythos on the small screen. So anyway, that's the 4th of December, and that's The Signalman from 1976. You can get The Signalman on DVD, so I would check that out. Although last time I checked, because it was a limited release, The Signalman actually costs around about £40 or something like that at the moment. to get. I'm sure there'll be another release of it eventually, but definitely go and check that out. And I will be back tomorrow with another ghost story, and hopefully I will not take about 1,000,000 takes to record that because I kept blowing out my candle. I nearly did it again now.